and welcome to another episode of Wear Many Hats, the podcast that's totally dedicated to the FM and property industry. Today, we've got a fantastic guest with us. It's Kelly Bream. She's the former COO of Bidwells. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And I know this isn't your first podcast, is it? So you're
Not.
you're quite used to them.
You might have some people switching off at this point.
this is a different story. So we're going to talk about your background and how you got to where you got to, and and maybe next steps and what you're doing, after. So let's rewind a bit. Where did it all start for you in your career?
So I actually started in the hotel industry. So yes, I was a duty manager for a hotel before I went to university.
Okay.
And I studied law and specialised in real estate. So I originally wanted to be a barrister. And sort of once I qualified as a surveyor, I was working in sales and lettings for a startup business.
Okay.
And then moved across to property and asset management.
Right.
And that was for a small family-owned company, but some really prestigious portfolios in central London.
Nice.
And then I moved across to Berkeley Group, and that's where I spent, quite a chunk of time, almost 9 years.
Yes.
And I was operations director there. And that was looking at everything from estate and operational management to customer service to sales and client journeys, but also looking at the design for management. So how the schemes were built for sort of optimal design experience for our clients. And then about 8 years ago, I saw a bit of a shift in the market towards build to rent.
Yes.
And I wanted to, develop out a portfolio and sort of launch an owner operating platform. And I was sort of introduced to a small family office that had a small portfolio, and they were sort of interested in build to rent as well. So launched the first business. Yeah. That didn't quite go down the route that I had hoped. And actually, they were more interested in buying equity shares in distressed businesses or distressed property portfolios. So it was a really interesting role, but I wasn't actually developing out and doing the build-to-rent concept that I originally had in mind. So I decided to exit, sort of sell out of that business. And I then went on to co-found Verve Life, which is a build-to-rent third-party operating platform. Yeah,
you were there a while, weren't you?
Yeah, and so I was there for a few years, and my role there was setting up the business, putting in place the management team, the systems, bringing in the clients. And then I was approached by Bidwells, who are an 185-year-old professional services firm, and they were on a bit of a journey themselves post-COVID.
Yes.
Everybody was sort of looking at science and tech as a market, and Bidwells were quite dominant in that space, particularly being based in Cambridge and Oxford. Yeah. And so they found themselves competing against larger organizations. And so really my role was to go in and look at the growth strategy for the business, how to develop the brand, the service lines, and the proposition to the market. And that's what I've been doing.
Wow. That's amazing journey. I mean, did you always know that? I mean, obviously you went to uni, you said, and law and real estate. It seems to be in your career path, completely. Is that the path that you knew you were going to go on, or?
It wasn't actually. So I used to be head of the debate team. So I used to love, anything that's a debate or arguing. So being a barrister was actually what I thought I was going to do. Albeit I do have family who are in surveying and estate agency. So I guess you could say property is sort of a part of my family story. But it wasn't what I necessarily was going to do. But then I think once I, started doing more of that at university and sort of working in the industry, it felt like something that,
it was right.
It was right. And, there's so many facets to it as well, so.
Yeah, I can see that. What or who gave you the real push in your career? You mentioned your family, but is there anyone else that sort of gave you a push, or is it just family?
I don't think there has been any one individual, if I'm honest. I think I'm naturally quite competitive.
Yes.
And I think coming into the industry 20 odd years ago, it was quite male dominated.
Correct.
And there was probably a sense of myself driving, wanting to prove myself in this environment and, get a seat on the board or, become a director or found a business. All of these things were probably driven by my own competitive nature and wanting to prove that there was a sort of space in the market. And obviously there's been lots of people along the way who have, been great supporters and advocates and allies. But no, probably not one individual other than my own competitive needs.
And a cluster of others. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
That helped you on your way. I love that. And I'm going to throw another question in. Do you feel it's changed in terms of being a male-dominated environment? Do you feel it's changed?
I feel
in your 20 years.
I mean, I feel it has changed. Has it changed enough is probably another question.
Yeah.
Which the answer is probably not. I have certainly seen some change, and I think the younger groups coming through now, they have more, women to look up to, and can see that there are opportunities there. And I think that's really important. That perhaps wasn't there 20 odd years ago. I think there was far fewer that you could sort of pinpoint out. So it has changed. I think there is a want for most organizations to do more in this space and recognize just how valuable and important, having a diverse board is. And obviously it's beyond just gender, but
it is.
Those are really important considerations for any successful business. So I think the understanding is there, but I still think we're perhaps not seeing enough talent being nurtured or coming through, or opportunities really being positioned where they could be.
And I feel like having more females on the show in particular will help. I'm hoping that we're getting out to listeners out there that will listen to you and your story and other ladies that I've had on the show and think, I can do this, most of you are quite competitive, I find. I found that, especially the heads of or COOs and CEOs, they're very competitive. And I guess that maybe and thick-skinned, I think that's another word I use. But it's definitely some advice for people out there to take on board. But I'm glad it's moving in the right direction anyway. So what did a day in your life? What does it actually look like? Use your latest role if you like.
I mean, every day is different, particularly in the COO role. And that's probably a part of why I love that type of role so much, because you've got broad teams. Some days you could be dealing with clients and actually, whether it's client entertaining or, looking at project specifics for clients, where they could be actually working with your direct teams. So, it could be a people issue, it could be a strategy session, it could be a big marketing and brand campaign or a big event. So it's really varied. And no such typical day, but the obvious is probably, you're up, you're sort of looking at emails and traveling into one of the offices if that's sort of where I need to be. Try to have as many meetings as I can, face to face, particularly when I'm in the office. I prefer that to Teams. I find that you can actually have, some proper open connection. And then it's, it might be the odd board meeting or committee meeting or sort of strategic workshop. I try not to have too many meetings. I find that they, kill innovation.
Absolutely. A meeting to have a meeting.
Yes, exactly.
To arrange another meeting.
I always say if you're putting a meeting in the diary, I need to know why I'm valid to be there and what is the purpose of that meeting? What's the outcomes? I can't sit there for the sake of sitting there.
It's a great bit of advice, though. Do I need to be at this meeting? Absolutely, because you could be doing something else.
Yeah.
That's great. A great bit of advice there as well. So let's talk challenges. I mean, what's tested you in your previous roles? Is there anything that, there's probably quite a few, but is there anything that you can think of that comes to mind?
I think anybody that works with people will know that's always probably quite a challenging part of being in business. And that is because, as human beings, we're all quite complex and we all have very different needs. And how you might approach one problem with one person is completely different with somebody else. And how you might approach a problem, and I've done a number of these where I've been in strategic workshops and I have been talking about, a big thing that we need to be working on, and here's the solution and here's how we're going to execute it. And then I look at the room and everyone's blank faced and it's like I've just presented in French. And you sort of sit there and go, what's everybody not getting?
Yeah.
And part of that is because, how our brains operate in slightly different ways.
Yeah.
So I'm somebody who's quite strategic and I move into execution quite quickly. And one of the things I found with working with people is, actually you might have somebody who's really driven on the data. So they're not going to understand strategy and execution. They need the data to be able to make that decision. Or you might have somebody who's really emotive. So they work with their emotions first and what's the impact on people. Yeah. And so your decision making becomes more about who's in the room and what are they going to respond to. Gosh. So I certainly think one of the challenges I've had is trying to work out who am I selling to, what is the problem and how do I unpack that for those in the room? And, there's probably less about me shoving my idea and this is the way we do it, but more about understanding what they need out of this particular session to get the best out of them. And I find that becomes more challenging the more senior you become because you're driving bigger, more complex decisions and you're trying to bring different people along, and it could be your team, it could be stakeholders, it could be shareholders, it could be investors. You've got a number of different people who all have very different requirements as to what it is that you're trying to put across. So I definitely think that is a challenge sometimes is how to communicate really effectively with your people. Yeah, gosh. And is that something that you've just learned over the years? Is that something that you were taught or I think or learned? A combination actually. I have had some great mentors. I've also, I do believe in development and training and being self-aware. I've done the Herman Whole Brain, I've done Insights, I've done GC, I've done a lot of these where I think it is useful to see where your strengths are. So I know where my strengths are, but I also know where my weak points are. And that's actually probably more important because if I'm going into a meeting and I know actually that's not my skill set, right? I need to go and find somebody who does have that skill set to help me get this over the line or translate this in the right way. I think, sometimes there is this belief that we have at a certain level, we should be able to do it all, or we should have all of the answers. And I don't think that's the case. I think the biggest skill you can have is knowing who to bring in when. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think, I'm 50 years of age. I've never done that. Okay. It'd be interesting to know what my skills. I think I know what they are, but like you say, it's more important to work on the ones that you're not so great at. Yeah, I want to take note of that. And they're always the uncomfortable ones that people don't really want to spend time doing because they're not natural. Yeah, and so we tend to avoid them and really focus on just really leaning into our strengths. And sometimes that works, but I think having a bit of an awareness as to how you can navigate some of those other skills is quite important. Yeah, and develop them. Yeah, I love that. So where do you think the industry is heading now? I think that's a huge question. It is. It's very broad, isn't it? Very broad. What comes to mind? Yeah, and I think we're at a really interesting point in the market, and the industry has been stagnant for a while now, and there is lots of macroeconomic factors at play here, which is stifling the industry to some extent. But I think we would all like to hope or believe that there should be some light at the end of the tunnel because, we have been in this dark period for a number of years now, and we've really got to get building first and foremost. We've got to get the housing sector moving. I think changes to planning, particularly in London, has been helpful over the last few weeks. So that's positive. I think there is a huge place for the rental sector and having a professionalized product, particularly with the renters reform that's come through. And I think we'll see a number of landlords leave the market. And so that provides opportunity for build to rent.
Yes.
I'm a huge believer that senior living or later living has a long way to go. We are an aging population, and I'm not quite sure we've unlocked that housing problem there, and how we get people to downsize but without feeling that they're in a sort of retirement village, and there's lots of sort of stigma around that. So I think there's lots of opportunity to create a really interesting and exciting product there. And same with co-living. Yeah, I think we're starting to see obviously a lot more of that, and people talking about that outside of London now, which is hugely positive. And I think that's a really great stepping stone from student before perhaps moving into a bigger rental, having that own space, but also for those that pied à terre or need a space in a city. So I think the key is going to be variety of housing. That is what unlocks social mobility. That's what helps with productivity and creating strong communities. So I think it's true mixed use development, I think is the answer.
Love that. Never really spoke about that on the show before, so that's very positive to go down that route. So I mean, obviously we talk about sort of AI and ESG. What sort of excites you around that sort of stuff? Are you getting involved in that? You mentioned tech earlier, so is that something you're sort of tackling? Or
absolutely. I'm hugely excited by AI.
Yes.
Don't get me after a glass of wine when I go down the sort of conspiracy theories around AI and where I think the future is, but I'm hugely excited by it. I think as an industry, there's a lot we need to unlock. I think we are bound by a lot of manual processes, a lot of red tape, a lot of disjointed systems. I think the nature of development is really disjointed because you're moving from different, regulatory bodies, different professional bodies. It might start with an architect or it's planning and then to M&E contractor, whoever it might be. You're moving through so many different stages. There's so many different systems, and I think having a way of automating some of this processing, particularly around planning applications, feels like an obvious one. But, also the facilities. How do we create these developments where we can then hand them over, in a really effective way so they can be managed? I mean, how often have we walked into a plant room and what once was the sort of, the M&E schematic on the wall is no longer remotely resembles what's in there, but no one's got any sort of guide of where pipes may or may not run. And so I think there's real opportunities for operational efficiencies through AI. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, me too.
I think the industry is notoriously slow to adopt tech, and we tend to make excuses. It's hard, or it's expensive, or it's unknown, or GDPR or whatever else sort of comes into it. But I think it's something we're going to have to embrace. So I think lots of opportunities there. And from an ESG point of view, I mean, I'm hugely passionate about ESG, sustainability. And to me, those businesses that really understand environmental and social importance and the impact that they have, I think are the businesses that are going to succeed, because I think there's profit with purpose is really powerful. And those businesses that get it and are future-proofing the built environment with those in mind are going to be the ones that we'll still be talking about in 10 years' time.
And obviously you worked with Bidwells. They're a B Corp company, so that's good. You're practicing what you actually preach. You have to actually have to do it.
Absolutely.
Not just a tick box, I think. You've got to...
No, really important. And, Bidwells were hugely passionate about sustainability. It's actually deep rooted in their DNA. They do a lot in the energy and climate space. Right. They manage forestry. Okay. They're sort of involved in natural capital or wind farms. Okay. So it really is something that was important to them. So becoming B Corp was a bit of a natural next step for them, because they're already thinking about the environment. You know, they're thinking about the communities that they're working in. So from an ESG point of view, it was a no-brainer.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned about the industry not sort of picking up quick enough. Do you feel like it's innovating fast enough, or are we still playing catch up? I think you kind of sort of touched on this earlier. There's some areas that we could probably do with working on.
I think we are definitely more aware of our need to speed up and invest and get involved in prop tech as a sort of whole. Yep. I think there's lots of conversations about it. I think this is sometimes the issue is we talk about it a lot, but sort of executable, actionable sort of solutions perhaps aren't quite at the forefront of where they need to be. I think interestingly, post-pandemic, we as an industry, I think, have recognised that we can be more digital, on Absolutely. If we want to be, and therefore, we've got proof that we can do it. But it is also expensive, and it is also fragmented, and that's, I think, the bit that everybody's grappling with. Albeit there is a desire to invest in it. There is a desire to train staff in it. And I think we're seeing that from, a number of organisations. So the appetite's there. It's going to be about how we actually execute in practice.
Food for thought there, isn't it? So looking back, what moment or project are you most proud of today? Probably got a few, but what one comes to mind?
The one that probably springs to mind is when I was at Berkeley Group, and it is probably One Tower Bridge. It's such an iconic development, and to be involved, right from first shovels in the ground to handing over the final set of keys. Is really quite something. There's not often that you can say you've worked on a project that is, opposite, Tower of London and by Tower Bridge, and you've got, City Hall next door. I mean, it's really quite something, and a cracking development. So that's probably something that I know in 30, 40 years, I'll be, still walking by and going, I was involved in that project. And, because it's so iconic. And every time I see it on TV, when there's a sort of a nice drone shot of the city, I still go, oh, there's One Tower Bridge. So that feels, like something I'm super proud of.
Iconic.
Yeah.
I love that. and what's something you wish you knew when you were starting out? You went to uni, didn't you?
Yeah. Perhaps that it's not a straight career path. I think you sort of have these aspirations or these thoughts that you're going to go in and you'll sort of get promoted and you'll get promoted and you'll sort of move a steady ladder, and that's sort of how your career will go. And the reality is there's a lot more sidestepping, there's a lot more grind, there's a lot more actually I need to go and develop in this area, and that continuous self-development, and recognizing that sideways moves are just as important as up the ladder moves, because you're learning different skill sets. And I think that's something that I perhaps, if somebody said write out your career path, I think it probably would have been quite a sort of, I'd be this, a surveyor, and I'd then become an associate, I'd become a director, I'd be, it almost be sort of quite obvious. But actually, for me, that hasn't been that. I've now been a co-founder, I've been a non-exec, I've had a number of different roles, but they have all hugely complemented my skill sets now. And I feel like I'm a lot more well-rounded for having a variety of roles that perhaps were not, as straightforward as I had once thought they might have been.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't feel like you're a failure if you do change your mind and want to go down a different path. I think, I was in recruitment for 25 years, and that's such a long time.
Yes.
And I've run my own businesses, I've worked for others, but gosh, I probably wasn't brave enough to say, okay, I really fancy doing this. There's been a few careers where I've thought, I fancy that, but never been brave enough to do it. So I guess it's about being brave as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
And saying it's okay to change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, I know leaving the comfort of a big PLC to, found a business, that's quite a big, a big jump. And then when I went back out of, founding businesses and sort of being in full control of those, but moving into a partnership, everyone sort of said, oh, that feels like an odd move. But to me, that was, that's a different skill set. That's a different role. It's a different business. It's a historic, long-standing business. So, I think you learn something from each of these experiences. And so I think you're so right, being brave enough to go and try it. And also, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Go and do something else. Because you'll learn a lot from, those businesses that don't work, and probably more so than the ones that do work.
And like you say, it's not failure, it's development.
Yes, absolutely.
Lessons sometimes as well. I always say that, remain teachable. So if someone came to you tomorrow and said, I want to do what you do or have done, what would you say to them?
Oh gosh. I think the nature of the COO role is that it is incredibly varied. And so if you are somebody that I think likes structure and sort of likes your day to be a certain way and a bit more formulaic, this role perhaps isn't the one. So I think it's maybe looking at what is the role that you're after, what are the things that you enjoy, and I would probably come back to what gets you out of bed in the morning, and really where is your passion. And I sort of look at things and I go, I really love thinking big picture and strategically and direction of travel and growth and opportunity. I'm sort of quite optimistic, so I really love chasing that big piece, but I really like getting into the detail and executing. I want to see the results. I want to see, how a development's going to look once it's finished, or whatever the sort of project is. So, those are my real strengths, and therefore this role felt quite natural for me. So I think whenever I'm mentoring people, or people are sort of coming to me and say, this is the role I want, I always say, take a step back and go, what actually excites you, and what does that role therefore look like? Don't chase the title. Chase the job, or chase the company that's going to provide all of those exciting opportunities, because that's going to be the key and where you're going to get your best work. The title doesn't offer a lot. And I think if you speak to lots of COOs, they would probably all give you a very different JD.
Yes, of course.
I think they would all have, completely different. And I would say, I'm definitely more in the strategic growth, innovation camp, as opposed to the sort of stabilizing, really steady COO hands. So that's why I say there's less emphasis on the title, more about what are the functions that you're really excited about and really good at, and lean into those.
This is so interesting. I'm just, I think a lot of people are going to be listening to this, wanting to ask you questions. I think they'll probably be contacting you. You mentioned about mentoring. How did you get involved with that? Or is that just something you're naturally doing?
Yeah, so I benefited a lot from having a mentor. And I think having somebody that can put a mirror up to you and, help you challenge things that you might be doing or questioning, or things you think are unfair, or why aren't I here, but actually somebody being able to say, wow, have you thought about this, or have you looked at this, it was hugely beneficial. And the nature of I managed big teams, that sort of evolved, and I sort of have people say, actually, I'd love to have a mentor session with you. And so it went from there. And I seem to have fallen into a bit of a niche. I have a lot of females who I mentor. Yes, majority are females. And a lot of the time it's about sort of supporting them to, get their thoughts across, or to feel like they're being heard, or how they might progress in their career, and these are really important, and particularly for an industry that isn't as diverse as it needs to be. So just helping create that space is hugely important. So it's something I'm passionate about, and I've sort of got lots of mentees as a result of that, and they vary in seniority, they vary in industries as well.
Yeah.
So some investment, some in the creative field, some in, sustainability or traditional real estate. It's less about the sort of the technical. It's more about helping them, elevate, them as an individual and be that challenger, but also advocate. And I think that's really important.
I love that. I love that you're doing that. I think that is so inspiring.
Thank you.
And so helpful.
Yeah.
To anyone that's stuck or not sure how to tackle something. I mean, I had a good parenting which taught me a lot, and I learned a lot from my dad as well. So and then as I've gone along, I've sort of looked at people and think, I want to be like that. But I guess at some point I probably could do with something like that. I've never really thought about it.
Yeah.
More food for thought. I've taken a lot from today's interview. And, I'm sure our listeners will, So let's talk about what you do outside of work.
Yes.
What are you up to? What are you doing? What do you do with your time?
Well, I mean, I wish there was lots of really exciting things that I could talk about. I'm sort of, got dogs. So I like to do sort of,
walking the dogs.
Walking the dogs. I'm sort of quite simple in that respect. I guess on a personal and professional level, I am writing a book. Which is exciting. So I've just submitted the sort of first 10 chapters. So I'm eagerly awaiting feedback on those. And hopefully we'll sort of be working through that over the coming months. And then the big challenge is finding a publisher. So if there's any publishers listening, do reach out. So I'm working.
You'll be inundated now.
So I'm working on that, which is really exciting. And I'm also hoping to launch a women's social networking platform. So I'm just pulling that together at the moment. And equally, we'll be looking for investors. So
investors and publishers.
Exactly. That's it. Please get in touch. And so, I'm sort of busy working through investor decks and what that might look like. And but certainly the sort of the view on, where I'm passionate is about how do I try and develop a group of women coming through across the real estate sector, but also beyond that. So this is the idea was that it will be, beyond the real estate sector, but, giving everybody the opportunity to connect and socialize and, really forge relationships. It's not just about development, but actually it's about, forging those relationships and encouraging women, to open up, but also to be more transactional. I think sometimes there is a sense that we have to, be the bestest of friends with somebody before we can actually, we sort of lean into the red, which is a great quality, but actually we're missing out on just being able to say, Rachel, I'd love to do this. Is there any chance you can help out with this? And, and equally, what can I do for you? And, being more transactional, I think is hugely important and helping women unlock that and realizing it's not about using anybody. It's actually about us all collaboratively, collectively, coming together and create better opportunities.
Oh, this is so exciting. Please keep me posted on all.
I will. I'll come back when it's launched.
Yes, do. Oh, I love it. So last question, and I'm sure you've had many bits of advice over the years, but what's the best bit of advice you've ever been given?
I think the best bit probably goes back to one of my earlier mentors who did talk about you might be in the built environment and you might be in real estate, but actually it is a people business first. And so being able to forge those connections and those relationships and recognizing that people do business with people.
Yes.
So you can be really, really great at all of the technical stuff, but don't ever forget that the bit that you always need to keep an eye on and work on is those relationships and being able to connect with people. And really great leadership is, because people want to work with you. They want to follow what you're saying. They trust in you. And that doesn't just come from being technically great at something.
Yeah.
It's because you are a person that they want to work with or do business with, and that's something that's really stuck with me. So, I might not always be technically the best, but I do know that I can bring the right people in to technically help with that, and that is the art of building really effective teams, in my view.
Gosh, what an interesting and inspiring journey you've been on, and continue to. It's powerful stuff we've just gone over there. And like I said, people probably will want to reach out to you. Is it okay for them to contact you on LinkedIn?
Of course, yeah. I'm on LinkedIn.
More mentees, did you say?
Yes, there we go. Yeah, there's a business in it.
I love that. I could be one of them.
Excellent.
It's been absolute pleasure to have you on the show, Kelly. Seriously, inspiring, and especially for the females out there and the gentlemen out there that are looking to get into a career as a COO or any of the other areas that you spoke about. But thank you so much, Kelly.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
And I'm excited to watch the rest of your journey.
Super. And buy the book.
Yes, absolutely will. 100%. 100% will. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that's the end of today's episode with Kelly. Very inspiring story there. So please do share to all your friends, colleagues and family who are looking to get into the FM or the property industry. Until next time, take care.